We've created an entire dive industry here in Miami that did not exist 8 years ago. And as a result of that, Miami is now a dive destination unto itself. It's not just a stopping point on the way to the Florida Keys. You come to Miami to dive wrecks. And while you're here, you discover that we have beautiful natural reefs as well that have been long just enjoyed by locals. So it has created an industry that did not exist before, and it's been very successful in creating fishery resources.
International Video Projects presents Dive Miami, the sport diver's guide to underwater adventure. Miami has become one of the most popular dive destinations of recent years. It has everything a diver could want. The balmy blue-green waters are warm year-round, and visibility can reach up to 100 feet. Much of the time, your diving is not impeded by heavy current. The reefs off the Miami coastline are well developed and teeming with tropical marine life. And as if this weren't enough, Miami is also known as the wreck diving capital of the world. Miami's reputation as the center for wreck diving grew as a direct result of a unique program.
The Dade County Artificial Reef Program, which is coordinated by the Environmental Resources Management Department, was established in 1981 for the purpose of restoring and enhancing our fishery resources. Since '81, we've put out over 500,000 cubic yards of reef material, which includes 27 different ships, anywhere from 300 feet in length down to 100 feet in length. The purpose behind all of this is to ensure that future generations have fishery resources in abundant supply, and we have been most successful in doing that. The ships come from a variety of sources, primarily from the Miami River. In the past, the Miami River was glutted with a supply of abandoned ships. Those have pretty much been used up, and now we rely upon confiscated customs vessels that we actually have to purchase at auction. And another source of material would be privately owned ships that are outright donated to the county for this purpose. The use of a ship is just the most economically available use of steel. It's very cheap and abundant when it comes in the form of a ship. And what we're looking for is substrate. We're looking for concrete, steel, fiberglass, and in some cases wood. And when the material is sunk at a depth that permits sufficient sunlight penetration, which translates to water less than 100 feet deep, it provides the foundation for the marine growth, which attaches to the vessel. And then their presence on the hull provides a food supply for juvenile fish, and then adult fish take up residence. So what we're doing in the artificial reef program is just speeding up a natural process. Nature provided rock outcroppings and hard bottom on which the natural reefs are occurring. We're providing steel and concrete on which the artificial reefs develop. Over a period of about 20 years, the artificial reef material will duplicate that of a natural reef system. So we're just expediting nature. Once a ship has been selected and purchased for use as a reef, the next step is in getting it cleaned up. The cleanup involves removing all the fuels and hydrocarbons on the vessel, any hydraulic fluids, freons, anything that is not compatible with seawater. Anything that would float off the vessel, such as wood and doors and any cargo, is also removed. When we're done cleaning up a ship, it's probably cleaner than the day it was launched on its very first day. The other thing that we look for is we'll then take that ship and we'll do a biological survey offshore, and we'll place it on a sand-barren bottom so as not to compete with a natural reef system. The actual sinking operation requires coordination of the Miami-Dade Bomb Squad as well as the Florida Marine Patrol and the U.S. Coast Guard for security purposes. We'll take the ship out and deliberately anchor it on a pre-selected site where we did our biological survey, and then we will very carefully use explosives to put it down rapidly right on that bottom so it does not move from that site selected. And that's the process. The entire operation generally takes 6 months from location of the ship to sinking. The explosives are set up in 4 areas, bow, stern, and 2 sections in mid-hull. One of the sections would be the engine room compartment, and they're sand-blasted charges, which means their bags of sand are placed on top of the dynamite and the blast is deflected downward. As a result of that, the vessels generally go straight down and flood evenly, and 9 times out of 10 will settle on their full length of the keel. The fish are attracted to reef material within hours after placement, and that's due to the fact that ships or the other types of material we deploy set up a pressure wave in the water column. Fish have evolved a method of detecting pressure waves, which they use in finding prey, such as a hurt, injured fish in the water. And they will then be attracted to this pressure wave, come into the area, find the vessel, and then out of curiosity at first, stay around it. Within weeks, we'll get an algal growth on it, followed by soft and hard corals. And anywhere from 6 months to a year after the vessel's placed in the water, we will have a marine community there that didn't exist before. And it gets better and better every day.
One of the first wrecks destined for a new life as an artificial reef is the Almirante. The 200-foot freighter, a U.S. Army supply ship, sits in 130 feet of water off Elliott Key. Her time underwater has left her encrusted with coral and alive with fish. The Ultra-Freeze went down in the summer of 1984 and is one of the most popular deep dives. She bottoms out at 120 feet, but her top is as shallow as 70 feet. Underwater photographer Pat Ford returns again and again to the Ultra-Freeze and finds her one of his favorite underwater models.
Colors are only brought out by lights up to about 3 feet away. So if you really want to appreciate the coloring down there, bring yourself a flashlight, a nice strong flashlight, and get into the dark crannies and up close to things and turn the light on. You'll be amazed at the difference in the colors. One of the tricks in getting close to fish, such as these schooling fish like the amberjacks or the horseye jacks, is to try and move as slowly as possible, not make any sudden movements with your arms. If you can just sort of hover in one place and glide up to them or get in their path and let them glide up to you, they won't panic. If you come up to them in an aggressive manner, fast, jerky movements, they're going to think that you're a predator and they're going to be out of there real quick. Certain wrecks develop certain types of fish life that are almost residents. For some reason, the ultrafreeze has always had a large school of horseye jacks hanging around its superstructure. If someone wanted to go out on the water and catch a horseye jack, it would be almost impossible to predict where you could go about doing this. But every time we dive the ultrafreeze, there's always this school of hundreds of horseye jacks swimming around it. Sometimes the divers can get right in the middle of the school of fish, and it makes a great sequence for photos or videos.
Miami boasts a multitude of experienced dive operators, all of whom are knowledgeable on the many different wreck sites.
Our first wreck dive today is going to be the Orion, which was a tugboat that had worked in the Panama Canal, and it was brought to Miami, and it was sunk in the early 1980s, I believe 1982. It sits in 95 feet of water. It's a very famous wreck. It's been shown in most of the dive magazines. It's great for photography. It has a wheelhouse which is still intact. People pose in the wheelhouse, and photographers come back with very good pictures. Still does look like a tugboat.
Like most of the wrecks that comprise the artificial reef program, the Orion is just a short boat ride from the Miami Beach Marina. She sits in about 100 feet of water and is a photographer's paradise.
The Orion is a tugboat that's been down for a good number of years. One of the interesting aspects of the dive is you can swim right through the entire ship. The hold has got huge schools of glassy sweepers that sort of move in and out. And they're always in the same place on the wreck on every dive. Most of the wrecks are designed to allow several entrances and exits for the fish and the water current to flow through and for divers to get through safely. Some are just better than others. One of the oldest wrecks in Miami is the Biscayne. This wreck lies in about 60 feet of water and is probably best known as a checkout dive for every dive shop in the whole South Florida area. It's usually clear, it's usually calm. The top of the deck is about 40 feet. The sand is probably 55 to 60 feet. It's got schools of resident fish that are very tame. They're used to being fed. There are several pet eels that live around the structure and in and out. Probably the biggest spotted moray I've ever seen, who's very friendly, will eat out of your hand. Recently, there's a big green moray that took up residence in here. It's got an amazingly thick development of coral and crustaceans. It matches most of the other wrecks that are world famous, such as the Balboa down in Grand Cayman. The coral looks like it's been developing over decades, not just a matter of years. On all the wrecks that have a very massive coral growth, it's very important for the divers not to try and step on it, pull it, kick it, brush against it with their fins, and you just have to be very sensitive. Another one of Miami's deep wrecks is the Blue Fire. This ship lies in about 120 feet of water, and again, it's about 100 feet down to the deck, and there's really not any need to go any deeper than the main deck of the ship. There's very little on the sand, areas around the ship. The top of the ship has got the best and prettiest coral formation. Once in a while you can see schools of snapper milling around the superstructure, which has fallen off to the side. But if you want to increase your dive time and enjoy the dive more, don't go to the sand. This is a group of wrecks called the Sarah Jane. Several wrecks have been sunk in the same area over the years. Some of them are wooden and some of them are metal. The main one is a big metal barge, but the wooden wrecks decompose a lot faster, obviously, than the ones with the metal base. The wooden wrecks also attract a different type of coral growth and fish life. The wrecks lose their high profile very quickly. There's a different type of coral formation and sea life available on almost each wreck, so you can cover actually 4 or 5 wrecks on one dive, but due to the depth and the lack of the relief, the lack of the height of the wreck, your dive time is limited. The Belcher barge was donated to the artificial reef program by the Belcher Oil Company. It was filled up with huge concrete pipes and debris. The Belcher barge has probably got the biggest collection of barracuda on it that I have ever seen. In the winter, the schools of barracuda will be stacked up from the sand all the way up to the surface. This is a wreck called the Shamrock that's north of Government Cut. Government Cut is one of the major entranceways along the South Florida coastline for the cruise ships and the commercial freighters and barges. As the tide sweeps out, the flow from Biscayne Bay through Government Cut usually drifts up north, so that the wrecks north of the cut have an entirely different pattern of development of life. The water's usually not quite as clear as it is south, but the growth seems to be much faster and the fish life seems to be much more intense. This is probably the best spot in all of Miami for macro photography. Not particularly the Shamrock, but the concrete pipes. They're all in the same general area, and they're usually done as a second dive instead of a reef on the way back from one of the deeper wrecks. This is a barge called the Police Barge. It was sunk by a bunch of people many years ago and was sort of isolated, and for years no one knew even that it was there. The concrete pipes were put down several years later in the same vicinity because of the increased growth on this barge. For some reason, there seems to be an incredible amount of fish life around these wrecks in the form of minnows and grouper and cobia, bigger fish. At night, a lot of the sport fishing boats go out and specifically try and catch mutton snappers and cobias on this area of wreck.
One of the more unusual sinkings in the artificial reef program was that of the Doc DeMille. She was sunk by the Air Force and provided a good opportunity to get in a little target practice. The Doc DeMille ended up in 140 feet of water, but her uppermost reaches lie in only 70 feet. The St. Anne Daré is a trawler of 110 feet. Because her bottom lies at only 70 feet and tops out at about 30, she allows a great deal of bottom time.
Several of the boats run night dives. They usually run them on Saturday nights or sometimes in the summer during the week on Wednesdays. And what they do is they leave the dock about 6 o'clock where there's still daylight. And they'll go out and anchor up on a wreck and do what they call a twilight dive on the wreck. They'll dive just as the sun's going down. You'll go down on a wreck in 70 or 80 feet of water and be able to, go all the way around the wreck, and it'll be dark by the time you come up. When you come back up to the boat, then they'll move over to one of the shallower wrecks, the 40 or 50 or 60 foot wrecks, or do a reef. But there's plenty of night diving in Miami. No one ever thinks about it. That's something that's more, thought of as the Bahamas or Cayman or something like that. All the coral that covers the entire wreck blossoms at night. Some people have done the ultra-freeze, some of the deeper wrecks, the older, deeper wrecks, or the Orion at night, and they just say it's breathtaking because everything that covers the entire wreck is coral, and at night it's all out and breathing, and the night creatures are out walking around. It's fascinating. Well, at certain wrecks, the fish are very friendly, and the dive master or the dive captain will know which wreck to go to if you really want to get some photographs or some video of feeding the fish. You can bring pieces of cut fish for bait, ballyhoo or pilchers, or hot dogs. The grunts love hot dogs. And the moray eels sort of look at you strange if you try to feed them a hot dog, but that works. Even Cheese Whiz works, just like it does in Grand Cayman. One of the interesting things about Miami is when you leave the wrecks for your second dive, the boats usually take you to a patch reef. Instead of a long-running barrier reef, Miami's got a series of small areas of maybe 100, 200, or 300 yards in circumference, or in diameter actually. And some of the coral life is exquisite here. It's very delicate, you have to be very careful, but some of it is as good as any place in Florida. Each dive boat captain has got his own peculiar little patches that he thinks are the best, and he'll generally take you to the ones that he likes the best, and the ones that have the highest growth of the coral or the most fish. The reefs themselves, the trick is in finding each one. We find them by Loran numbers or lineups with the shoreline, and there'll be plenty of brown or green spots on the ocean floor that you can see from the boat, and he'll run over a dozen of those before he gets the one that's his favorite. Most of the charter boat, the dive boat captains, have specific reefs areas that they found over the years that they know are good for lobster. These are all very highly kept secrets. So once they find a good lobster area, they will run specific lobstering trips from time to time and take you back to this same spot each time, which works out pretty well. The lobsters are different than the northern lobsters because they don't have claws, so they don't bite you. And you measure them by using a small gauge like this, actually. and you can measure the tail area of the lobster, which has to be 5.5 inches, or the carapace, or the head of the lobster, which only has to be 3. So all you do is, once you get the lobster, you can put this point between the 2 horns and take a look at where this sets. If this area hits the tail, you got to let him go. If it's still on the carapace, then he's yours.
In Florida, here's a guide for sport divers to take shellfish. Ask your boat captain or dive master for more information about rules governing protected waters, sanctuaries, and spearfishing. The Dade County Artificial Reef Program has provided sport divers with a vast and rich underwater playground that abounds with marine life. This ongoing program will continue to benefit the sport diver and make Miami an even better dive destination.
The future is going to hold, depending upon available funding, bright promise in that we're going to be employing more and more prefabricated units. We're not going to rely upon material of opportunity such as the ships exclusively. We will go out and develop a reef by design and then place it, mimicking what the Japanese have been doing for the last 5 years in selecting and designing reef components. And we'll continue to use concrete and ships as they are available, but we'll get a little bit more sophisticated as the program evolves.
Public participation in the Dade County Artificial Reef Program is vital to its continued success. If you would like to contribute materials, energy, or funding, please call the Department of Environmental Resources Management of Dade County at area code 305-375-DERM. Comments and suggestions are greatly appreciated. If you're interested in obtaining the Loran Sea coordinates of any of the wrecks in the Artificial Reef Program, send a self-addressed stamped envelope along with $5 for each site specified to Metropolitan Dade County, Department of Environmental Resources Management, Artificial Reef Program, 111 Northwest 1st Street, Suite 1310, Miami, Florida, 33128.
This program was produced and licensed by International Video Projects Incorporated of Lakeland, Florida. For additional information about this program and other programs we offer, please write International Video Projects, 6700 South Florida Avenue, Suite 28, Lakeland, Florida, 33813-3312, or call toll-free 800-852-0662. Our collection of programs may also be reviewed on our website, www.videoprojects.tv. Thanks for watching.